And welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Tidal Flooding Talk, brought to you by the New Jersey Coastal Coalition in conjunction with our broadcast partners at Triax 57. We are fully in the midst of the holiday season. I did buy for a few people already. I'm feeling like I'm ahead of the curve, Palma. Now you have a big move going on, so I know that probably throws a wrench in the holiday Christmas buying there. But where are we on the Christmas buying?
So it definitely changed how I normally operate, but I did start Christmas shopping in September. So
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
I'm like an extra early Christmas shopper, but I get really excited to like pick out gifts for people. So
Okay. Okay. Wow,
yeah.
you're on top of the ball. That's
My
good.
husband, on the other hand, is like, I will remind him like every week for like a month. Like, if you want to order anything, I would do it soon because,
Right.
then it won't get here on time. And then the week of Christmas, he's going out to the store.
I get odd. Like I almost I don't even want to buy anything after December 20th because I just feel like I failed for the season if I don't already have it in hand by then. I have been actually buying myself a couple of things on Black Friday weekend just because the deals are so good. Like I got a pair of sneakers from Under Armour, that was nice, and I got um I forget. I guess it'll come in the mail and I'll see. I'll let you guys know next week. Can't remember the other thing I had. Anyway, we're in the holiday season, which means we're not in hurricane season. The official end of hurricane season was on November 30th here. And here to talk with us about hurricane season is Cassie Mora from the National Hurricane Center. She is our second National Hurricane Center guest we've had this year, based in Miami, Florida. Cassie has been with the National Hurricane Center for a number of years already. And a bonus, she's from New Jersey, which is even better. And she says she comes back often, which is even better than that. So, Cassie, thanks for coming to Tidal Flooding Talk. And we hope you feel a little bit at home while you're chatting with us over the next half hour.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you guys so much for having me. If there's anything I love to talk about, it's meteorology, hurricanes in New Jersey. So happy to
Awesome.
be here.
Thankfully, we haven't had to talk too much about hurricanes in New Jersey this year. We had Hurricane Erin really churn up the waves here. We actually had our highest summertime tidal flooding on record for a number of locations at the South Jersey Shore. But tell us just more about you. You know, what's your role with the Hurricane Center? How long you've been with the Hurricane Center for, and what got you interested in weather?
Yeah. So I've been at the Hurricane Center now for 6 hurricane seasons. I came on right at the beginning of hurricane season in 2020. That was fun. And my role here at the Hurricane Center is I'm a storm surge specialist. So very specifically, I only forecast the storm surge that hurricanes push on the shore. And what got me into meteorology, I'd say my origin story is pretty normal. I was a kid and it was Tropical Storm Ernesto actually in 2006 that ran over the Outer Banks. And instead of being terrified, I was absolutely fascinated and was obsessed with the tropics ever since then. And Hurricane Sandy pretty much solidified that I wanted to go into the National Weather Service and work somewhere like the National Hurricane Center. I thought that the forecasting was fascinating, and I wanted to learn more, and that's how I ended up here.
You know,
Joe,
I
I keep saying we need to keep a record of this. Every time we ask somebody that has a career in weather, how did you become interested? I think 9 times out of 10, they knew when they were like a little kid. Like, this is
Yeah.
something I'm
yeah.
interested in.
Yeah, when she said pretty typical, everyone's probably like, I don't know any meteorologist. Is that typical? But when Cassie said it to me, I'm like, yeah, that checks out. Although I have to say, I've never heard anyone say they've been interested in weather due to Ernesto. That's a
It's a
first.
very random storm.
That's a first for me. So
Yep.
you win that one. Is there anyone at the Hurricane Center who liked Ernesto? Anyone else are they is that pivotal in their careers?
I wouldn't say that it was a canon event for anybody, but there are people here that remember it. It caused a lot of flooding in North Carolina. So
Okay.
there's some folks here that still remember that storm.
Okay. And speaking of North Carolina, you went to school in North Carolina. You went to NC State, graduated from there in 2020, I believe. So
Mhm.
graduated, I guess, during the peak of COVID there. What was that like? Transitioning out of college and getting into the workforce, during that time.
That's a great question. It was very interesting. I was very lucky. I had what's called a Pathways internship, which is basically a NOAA internship that's like your foot in the door into the government. And I got that my junior year, so before COVID started. So I had already had my foot in the door, and I had been working with people at headquarters and talking to people here at the Hurricane Center, because the research I was doing was in the tropical area. So I knew what I wanted to do. So I was very lucky I had made some connections before COVID hit. And by the time COVID hit, I had already kind of solidified that I was going to be going from Pathways into the Hurricane Center. But it was an interesting time. Never walked, never got to graduate. Funny little story. NC State did have everyone back to come graduate a year later in August of 2021. And I remember asking my director, what are the odds I'm going to be able to walk at my graduation working here at the Hurricane Center? And he was like, very low for late August. And what ended up happening was Hurricane Ida made landfall. So I worked Hurricane Ida instead of going to my college graduation.
Well, that leads me to my question. What is a typical work day like for someone in your position, a storm surge specialist? And obviously there are peaks where I'm sure it's more intense for you.
Yeah, so we're a very small group. There's only 4 of us. So when a storm is making landfall, we go into full-time operations. So we're working 24 hours a day, usually around 10 to 12-hour shifts, switching off. And when there's not a storm making landfall, it's normal hours, 9 to 5. We're working on research and development of our model and our forecasting process. So when there's no storm, it's nice. It's a normal schedule. But during hurricane season, you're pretty much on call all the time. If there were to be something making landfall, we're getting called in and we're starting shift work.
And just a quick follow-up. Do you think with every storm that you're a part of, you learn something that could help improve what you do for the next time?
Oh, absolutely. We always say, like, hurricanes are, even though it may feel like there are some really active seasons, there's seasons like this where there's no activity. So they're a rare event. So you need to take notes every storm, and you learn from every storm and try to make the forecast better for the next time.
Yeah. With this hurricane season that we just had, I think the big story coming out of this was no, U.S. landfalling hurricane, which was the first time since 2015. Can you put that in context for us? Like, yeah, it's been 10 years, but is this something that happens, some frequency, and it's just been a long time, or is this something that's significant? And we'll say in a good way, we don't want that. But yeah.
Yeah, a much needed break. Certainly since I've been here, this has not been the normal. It's been very active since I came on in 2020. It is pretty rare that you don't see anything hitting the US, but it happens. There's ebbs and flows with how the season goes. We did get lucky this year and only had Chantal making landfall in the US and not as a hurricane, but still brought significant impacts, whether it was rip currents or rainfall. So we still need to look out each year, even if we're saying it's going to be a non-active season or active season, for potential impacts of storms that maybe are just tropical storms, or storms like Hurricane Erin that didn't make landfall, but still caused a lot of impacts to the U.S. East Coast.
Yeah. All right. We're going to take our first break here. We'll come back on the other side with more Tidal Flooding Talk. Thanks to the New Jersey Coastal Coalition, your flood insurance bills are lower and your streets safer from the reality of flooding. Since beginning in 2013, we build more resilient shoreline communities. Our member towns develop and share in best practices that anticipate future concerns and create flooding solutions. From our town-specific free web app for flooding information to our weekly Tidal Flooding Talk show, we focus on flooding 24/7. Visit www.njcoastalcoalition.com for more.
Hi, welcome back. You're watching Tidal Flooding Talk, and we are brought to you by the New Jersey Coastal Coalition. We would like to remind our viewers to prepare before the storm. Flooding can happen quickly. Prepare ahead of time by creating a disaster plan assembling a go bag, and signing up for emergency alerts. Make sure your family knows evacuation routes and communication plans. Preparation saves lives.
And we're back here with Cassie Mora, storm surge specialist at the National Hurricane Center. Cassie, we had 13 named storms, so tropical storms or hurricanes this season, 5 hurricanes, 4 major hurricanes. And just for the people listening, the named storms and the major hurricanes, that was about average. I would say we were a little below average on the hurricanes, not the major hurricanes, but the hurricanes. How did that compare to your forecast? And what do you think were those major factors as we were in the season that led to the season that we had?
Yeah, so it was within the range of the NOAA forecast that we had put out in the beginning of the season, but it was certainly an interesting season. There were a lot of weather factors at play that led to those bursts in really intense activity where you mentioned 4 major hurricanes, 3 Cat 5 hurricanes in the Atlantic. So when those favorable conditions all lined up, the environment was really able to capitalize there. We had above average sea surface temperatures across a lot of the basin. So yeah, when the environment was ready, those storms were able to capitalize, and 3 Cat 5s is a pretty impressive amount. But then we had periods of calmness and quietness, especially during the peak season. And that was influenced by a lot of dry air, a lot of shear, things that inhibit activity, and a lot of short-term weather patterns coming off the east coast of the U.S. that would inhibit activity forming near the U.S. coastline.
Yeah, and I'll toss the palm in a second, but we do want to just talk real briefly. Hurricane Melissa, that was like the one big caveat in this otherwise, quiet year. I believe the third most intense Atlantic hurricane on record. And is it the strongest or tied for the strongest hurricane on record in terms of winds at landfall, Cassie?
I would have to double check on what the winds were at landfall, but I know it's one of the strongest hurricanes at landfall.
Yeah, I mean, an all-time storm, to make long story short.
Certainly.
Yeah.
How would you say that communication and coordination was this year between the National Hurricane Center and local emergency managers?
Yeah, so for the US, we were able to communicate, as we always do, very well with emergency managers and decision makers when it came to Chantal and the rainfall from Chantal. Something we had to do this year as well, with so many storms steering away from the US, but coming pretty close with large wave fields. We saw a lot of danger for rip currents. So we were doing a lot of communication with decision makers about the really high rip current risk this year. We saw that with Erin and Humberto. We had this new rip current viewer that we actually premiered this year that showed the probability of rip currents along the coast. And that really helped communicate the message to people that there was even though storms weren't making landfall, there's still impacts from the storms. So that was very helpful this year. And then, as always, we work very well with our international partners, and that helped during Hurricane Melissa, making sure that everyone was ready and prepared for that storm to make landfall.
Yeah, I think that communication is, it's such a big deal for us in the coalition. And I think we've talked about this before. Is there a happy medium, where you don't overhype something, where people, will stop listening if you keep saying the same thing, that it's going to be a catastrophe, but also not downplay it?
Yeah, that is something that we think about here at the Hurricane Center. We see from the outside, there's a lot of weather enthusiasts that like to overhype these events. We try to control that message. And yeah, within the Hurricane Center too, we want to make sure that we're not desensitizing people to the words catastrophic or life-threatening. We want to make sure that those words are used wisely. And we really try to focus on the impacts from the event and how it will directly impact your life, and try to make this localized personal connection to people, rather than just trying to overhype and say there's going to be a horrible hurricane making landfall. We try to actually make it personal and say these are the impacts that you could possibly see from this storm if it were to form.
One of the things we hear a little bit of chatter about, is when storms make landfall, right? Like, the storm's 110 miles an hour. That's the hurricanes, you guys will say, right? And then we see a sustained wind that only is like 95 or 96. Is that something that you guys, take into consideration, think about, and, how do we improve upon that? I mean, obviously you're looking at more data than I'm ever looking at, but, I wonder, there is, especially on socials, about some chatter about that. I'm curious, like, what goes into that, that decision of what is the sustained winds, in your updates, and then how that translates into what actually happens at landfall.
Yeah, so we're always trying to forecast for what the coastline, what people are at risk of seeing. We never want to under forecast and people not be prepared for what they could possibly see. So sometimes that means overshooting. And that's just kind of the nature of the beast. But comparing 110 to maybe 90 mile per hour winds, at that point, you're seeing hurricane force winds. And again, we're trying to not hone in so much on the exact number. We're trying to communicate more of what the impacts mean for people.
Yeah.
So not rather than focusing so much on exactly what category of the storm is going to be, we say we're really trying to message more what the impacts you could see from the wind, from surge, from rainfall, communicating more of that message.
Yeah, I don't know if I have a question here, but just to add to that, we have had guests in the past, one in particular, very passionate about, the category 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is not perfect. There's a lot that goes in between. So I think that's definitely something that.
She's talking about Joe Bastardi, Cassie.
Oh, goodness.
Joe Bastardi, the most passionate man in weather, maybe. And he's from New Jersey, right?
Yep.
Yeah, from Summers Point. So we did have him on. He has his power and size index, for that. But, I think, and you probably would agree, like, especially since Sandy, the amount of impact messaging that the Hurricane Center has done has been like really, really good. Like it's like you said, it's about the impacts. It's not about, is it 110 miles an hour or 105 miles an hour? Because it's going to do its thing, right? I mean, at the end of the day, if it's going to impact you, it's going to impact you. That being said, as we go forward, right? I mean, there's so much talk about the cone. So 2-part question for you. Can you explain to people what the cone is, right? And then secondly, are we at a point, do you think, in the hurricane forecasting community where we could, show more of what the impacts are depending on how far apart? So, I know there's been some talk about, maybe it's a cone that is slightly different colors the further away you are. So it shows where the highest impacts are, or, showing, maybe widening the cone to increase that probability for what could really happen. Because I'm going to tease this a little bit, but the cone is not 100% certainty. It's a 2/3 probability forecast, right? So like, what's next on the horizon for, messaging where that storm's going to be and the type of impacts?
Yeah, great question. So for those who don't know, the cone is just showing where 2/3 of the time the center is going to go. So there's the center of the storm and we have this cone, and 2/3 of the time we expect the center of the storm to remain within the cone. It has nothing to do with the actual impacts from the hurricane, which is what we want people to be focusing on. So I'm so happy you're talking about this, because we actually have this new experimental cone graphic. This was one of the first years that we debuted it, and it was live on our website, where people can see, rather than just the cone, they can see the inland extent of our watches and warnings for the wind. So they actually can have a better idea of where the hazards are. So this is experimental this year, and we got a lot of feedback from our partners saying they loved it. It was a great way to see how the hazards extend outside of the cone and well inland. And it's something we plan on continuing to develop. And yeah, we're trying to make things better, make the communication of the forecast better, so people aren't just concerned if they're in the cone or outside of the cone.
Awesome. All right, we're going to take one more break. We'll come back with our last segment here on Tidal Flooding Talk. Welcome back to Tidal Flooding Talk. We're continuing our conversation about the 2025 hurricane season with Cassie Mora. Cassie, let me ask you this. So, Jersey girl, now living in South Florida. In your time, between New Jersey and South Florida, what's like the differences and the similarities in the mindset around hurricane season? Not like within NOAA, right? But just the people.
Yeah, so I personally came here and immediately felt like, okay, it's being talked about more for sure down here. There's sometimes signs I notice in the grocery store, or when I'm driving, there'll be signs on the highway reminding you to stay prepared for hurricane season. And they kind of remind me of, I don't know if you guys notice the signs in Jersey that'll say like peak deer season, like
Yes.
stay alert, stay
That's
prepared.
happening right now.
Happening
Right now,
now.
those signs
Yeah.
are up.
It kind of reminds me of that. So it seems to be maybe in the back of people's minds here. But something I have definitely noticed is that people make decisions based off of their experiences. So if they haven't experienced a storm recently, they're most likely not as prepared as they think they are. Their plan might not be in place in the way that we're trying to communicate, like have evacuation routes planned and ways to contact family if satellites go down and you can't reach them on your phone. So it seems like that's everywhere, Florida and Jersey, that if you haven't experienced something recently, you're probably not as prepared as you think you are. So I'm sure after Sandy in Jersey, people have a better idea of how to prepare for a storm. But if you've just moved to the Jersey Shore, or there's a ton of people in Florida that have moved here and have never experienced a hurricane before, I'm sure there's more that they could be doing to be prepared. And we try to continuously message that throughout the season.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And actually, I'll compliment you, Joe, because the last major flooding event that we had, he made these new graphics on that he was posting on social media that compared with the last major flooding event, and it like made it very easy to understand. Okay, I know exactly where that came up last time, to the curb or whatever, so it's going to be equivalent to that. So I think it is important for people to have like something to compare to, and to keep that risk factor. Like, it can happen, but not that we want a storm, but that is one silver lining. Like, it gives people a refresher of like what can happen.
Exactly. If you've never seen storm surge, it's very hard to visualize and make that impact personal to you so that you react.
Yeah. Look, in your time in Florida, have you like what hurricanes or tropical storms have you been a part of? I know southeastern Florida hasn't had the same kind of impacts that the west coast of Florida has had over the past couple of years.
Yeah, we've dodged a lot of storms over here in southeast Florida. I can't say that I've been through much. I think we might have been in a tropical storm warning once.
That's nothing for you guys.
Yeah. Last year we did see a lot of tornadic activity from Hurricane Milton, but that's about it. We've been really lucky here in Southeast Florida.
Good. I had a New Jersey question. What was it? Oh, yeah. Anything cooking at the National Hurricane Center, New Jersey specific, and any Jersey talk going on about hurricane season either this year or next year?
We do work with emergency managers from New Jersey, and we're constantly trying to keep it in the forefront of their minds. We remind them of the storm surge risk maps that we have. So yeah, we're always communicating with everybody from Jersey, and I love to get people down here that are emergency managers in Jersey so that I can connect with them and say, I know where it floods, and make sure that you're looking at these flooding maps.
Absolutely. All right. Well, Palma, any last questions?
Yeah, just to like go back to the basics, briefly. When you issue a surge warning, what should people do with that information?
Great question. So when we issue a storm surge warning, that means that we have looked at the area and we've deemed that area is at risk of life-threatening storm surge. So we are physically drawing these warnings, and we are taking a look at model data, and we've said there's a risk of life-threatening storm surge here. we need to issue a storm surge warning. And we don't do that lightly, because what they do is it sets off the wireless emergency alert on your phone. So when we know when we send out a storm surge warning, it's going to ping your phone. An example, one of those alerts is the Amber Alert. You know how jarring that sound could be. So we're keeping that in mind. And the warnings also help guide evacuation orders. So we're keeping that in mind as well, that where we issue these warnings, there's likely going to be evacuations, and that has a huge impact on people's lives.
Awesome. Well, Cassie, thanks so much for joining us here. I feel like we can keep going for another half hour, but we'll just have to have you come back on again. And maybe for the hurricane season, we'll have you come back on. Hurricanes.gov, National Hurricane Center website. You can see all the work that they're doing. Still good to check in even after, November 30th to see what's going on with the Hurricane Center. And we'll wrap up with our one thing we can't stop talking about, tidal flooding or otherwise. I usually go to Dan first, but Dan's unfortunately not with us tonight. So
you take it, Joe. You take it away.
Well, here's the thing. So what I can't stop talking about is going to loop Cassie and I in together here. So I can't stop thinking about where Cassie thinks North, Central, and South Jersey is.
Oh no!
I knew it was gonna be something.
So let's see.
I know for a fact Monmouth County is Central Jersey. There's just no other way to put it. That Monmouth County is Central Jersey. We can call anything north of Monmouth County and south of Monmouth County that's North Jersey and South Jersey. But
okay, wait. So I need a little more detail on this then. So you're saying Mercer County and Middlesex County and Hunterdon County then, or Central Jersey?
I guess they can be classified as Central Jersey.
Okay.
If you can,
Tom's River South Jersey in your book?
Yeah, I'd put that right on the borderline at least.
I don't know if Palma's ever been to Tom's River. You been up that far north, Palma?
I mean, I'm sure I have. I have, but I don't remember anything like that would make me say if it's central or. But I don't know.
Okay.
It's hard. You got to look for where there's more Eagles fans. Once you start getting into Eagles fan territory, that's just South Jersey.
You know what? I think I agree with that take, Joe. I think that's where, because I've thought about this. I don't know where South Jersey starts or North Central, but that I can get with that. That makes sense to me.
Palma's a Atlantic City, Margate, Egg Harbor Township person, so she's firmly within that scope. I don't know. I think Tom's River, Central Jersey, Cassie. I think really your line is like Manchester and LBI. Here's my hot take on LBI. LBI is Central Jersey during the summer and South Jersey outside of the summer. The locals are South Jersey, but there's so many people from Central and North Jersey that go to LBI that LBI is Central Jersey during the summer.
I think I can get on board with that because I see that as well.
Right. Just make sure you write that in the hurricane briefings, for the next time something comes to New Jersey, make sure you know when LBI is, or what time of year it is, in relation to LBI. Anyway, Palma, did you want to go with your one thing, or are we good on the Central South?
We're good with that because otherwise the only thing I'm really thinking about is Christmas, right? Okay. So I'll just stick with the debate over New Jersey. That sounds
okay. Yeah, that might be our holiday episode. We might do a full North, South, Central Jersey divide with Dan, Palma, and I. We'll see what happens.
That's hilarious.
Anyway, Cassie, thanks again for being on. We really appreciate it. We're gonna hopefully chat again in future. And we'll talk to everybody next Tuesday on Tidal Flooding Talk. We're going to have Dave Jones and Ellen Prager from GeoCollaborate. GeoCollaborate is our partner for our new emergency flooding weather web app. We call it WEMA for short. So we're going to chat with them all about it. For Palma Shiles, Cassie Mora, I'm Joe Martucci. We'll be back with you next week on Tidal Flooding Talk.